Zihark has always been a character in the Tellius series that resonated with me more than other characters in the game. Perhaps it had something to do with his introduction in Path of Radiance. The Grail mercenaries were trying to escape Crimea. Crimean soldiers were now on the run from the authorities. The Black Knight came after the heroes out of some random house. It was a village map. We got to see how awful humanity was to Laguz. It certainly was, at least to me, a memorable chapter both in gameplay and story. Enter Zihark, a self-described double agent acting as a vigilante fighter blending in with the kill all Laguz side of the fight, whose real intention is to find and help protect Laguz that were rumored to be on the run by Daein soldiers. After convincing Mordecai and Lethe that he's actually fighting on their side, he is allowed to join them. He's not a Grail mercenary, he isn't even from Crimea. Zihark is a man with a unique purpose in this world. He fights to truly free the Laguz from oppression, to create a world of peace between both races. In Radiant Dawn, he is first seen with Tauroneo and Jill, defending a desert fortress from Benyan soldiers. He became a high-ranking soldier in the Daein Liberation Army, and is now fighting for his home country's freedom from the Benyan Occupation Army. In Part 3 of Radiant Dawn, Zihark gets the opportunity to remain a soldier to Daein or defect and become a soldier for the Laguz Alliance. His character ending in Radiant Dawn tells us that he remains a mercenary ending Laguz-Bjork disputes throughout Tellius, eventually settling in Gallia. I mention his ending here because my praise for Zihark doesn't come from the goal itself, which is noble in its own right, it's the complicated journey he goes through to reach it. Because of the Benyan Senate tricking King Pelias into joining them against the Laguz Alliance, he will be on the side of those fighting Laguz again. And he must make a choice: to preserve the progress he's made, or to stick to his morals. This support science explores the origins of his goal from Path of Radiance, along with a discussion of his character through his recruitment, support, and base conversations. Then discusses the conflict within Zihark in light of finding out that Daein will return to battle against the race he sought out to protect. Zihark's principles are brave, if not overly idealistic in this pervasively racist continent, but it's his willingness to sacrifice everything in spite of that reality that makes him a hero. Something funny I didn't expect to think about is that Zihark is a subversion of the Navarre archetype. He's the first enemy unit in Path of Radiance that can be recruited to Ike's side, and also, he's a Myrmidon. But when you find out that he's actually waiting for the opportunity to help rescue Laguz, and when he starts to interact with your party, you quickly learn that he's not an edgelord in the least. He has a really endearing personality. His supports are colorfully written. For example, his C support with Brom goes from Zihark showcasing his leatherworking skills, to Brom telling him that he wants to teach his youngest son those skills, and then comes one of my favorite lines that Zihark has in the game.
I've got 5 sons and 3 daughters. In fact, my oldest girl is just about your age.
I figured you would have lots of children.
How'd you figure that?
Just look at you, Brom. You're a big man with a big heart. The perfect daddy.
You think so? Oh, stop, you're embarrassing me.
The rest of the support chain follows this wholesome, lighthearted tone and showcases how nice, smart, and sociable he is. He's also quite the flirt, putting on moves on Ilyana while also teasing her about her reputation among the men in the army. This chain is quite casual, but well written and continues to showcase Zihark's colorful writing. He's confidently forward in telling her he finds her cute, calls her a beef jerky thief in reference to her notoriety regarding her tendency to lure men into buying her food, but never remembering their names like she's some kind of heartless seductress. But in the end, he also takes her out on a dinner date. Zihark is a social guy with a big heart and an open mind, which isn't very surprising when one considers the circumstances around his recruitment. Zihark has always been open-minded and tolerant to Laguz, which is especially surprising because he hails from Daein, a country notorious for their severe mistreatment of Laguz through slavery and intolerance. His Muarim support chain showcases those virtues. After Muarim offers to sharpen Zihark's sword, a skill he learned from his time as a slave, he politely declines, but asks Muarim out for dinner, out of both gratitude and kindness. In his A support with Muarim, Zihark reveals something about himself that is incredibly unique in this world. After he gives a bundle of herbs to Muarim as a gift, Muarim turns it down because tigers in particular don't enjoy the scent of that herb. Zihark apologizes and thought that all Laguz liked it, but then reveals something interesting. His old girlfriend loved the scent. Zihark had a Laguz girlfriend, but societal pressures prevented them from being wed. The intolerance around their relationship, from both races at once, eventually broke them up. But even years later, Zihark has never loved another woman, and doesn't think he's going to ever again. The Path of Radiance art book states that his girlfriend died instead of just vanishing. And that may be true. Maybe she was killed. But regardless of what happened to her, it was the brutal status quo that tore them apart. From the very beginning, Zihark has never let the racist standards of Tellius dictate his happiness. It's because of the love he shared for his girlfriend that he fights to create a world free of those chains that keep everyone in place. He wants to change Dayan, and the world for the better, so that maybe next time a couple like theirs falls in love, they can live happily.
I joined the Toha Vigilantes solely for the purpose of saving Laguz. I'm not from Crimea, but when I heard she had joined with Gallia, I envisioned my perfect world, one in which the Laguz could live normal lives, free of oppression. However, when I came to Crimea, I found things were no different there than in any other Bjork nation. Of all the Bjork I've ever met, you're the only one who shares my conviction.
Zihark's origin and worldview puts him in one of the more interesting situations in Radiant Dawn. Having returned to his home country in Dayan and joining the Dayan Liberation Army, he first appears in a desert protecting a fortress alongside Tauroneo and Jill. Eventually, Micaiah's Dawn Brigade and the Liberation Army led by Pelias joined forces against the Benyan Occupational Army. Zihark's motivation to join the army is out of loyalty for his friends in Dayan, Pelias, and patriotism. He fights to give Dayan the chance to become the utopia he envisions, a country that treats Laguz and Bjork as the same. Currently, Zihark is in a good place. He's fighting for the people he cares about, and for a good cause. Eventually, the Liberation Army wins, and Pelias becomes the new king of Dayan. Soon after, however, Pelias becomes a pawn to the Benyan Senate after being tricked into signing a blood pact with Lethe. Not long after, Pelias gets ordered to sign with Benyan and aid them in their own war against the Laguz Alliance. Their first order: intercept the retreating Laguz Alliance at the Raban River, to finish their army off at their lowest point. Dayan cannot wait. Whispers among the soldiers say this is an old-fashioned subhuman hunt. Seeing such glee to kill Laguz again by attacking a routed enemy, comprised of people Zihark once called allies, weighs heavily on the mercenary's heart. Dayan hasn't changed at all. Whether free or occupied, the Dayans will hate the Laguz, and Zihark will be relied on by the same army to get the job done. Is it right to continue then? Should he turn his back on his ideals, fighting for his fellow patriots and comrades whom he built this army with, still hoping that things may change under King Pelias and Micaiah? Or should he betray Dayan and abandon everything he worked towards, and stick to his ideals? This is the crossroads moment for Zihark. Defect or not defect? The rest of this video explores the personal consequences of either choice, and attempts to answer which is the right one to make. Part 3, Chapter 6 is where Zihark's moral struggle begins. Here, Zihark has the choice of either defecting to the Laguz Alliance if he talks with Mordecai or Lethe. Otherwise, he remains with the Dayan Liberation Army. His second opportunity to defect happens in the next chapter, where the Liberation Army comes to blows with the Ike mercenaries for the first time.
I used my sword for Dayan. But am I really fighting for Dayan here? What am I doing?
Conflict brews within him, but interestingly, Zihark will not attack Laguz units from Path of Radiance, while those units may attack him. Clearly, this game mechanic suggests that Zihark is beginning to lose sight of what he holds dear. His pro-Laguz sentiments are clearly at odds with what he's doing, and yet he's self-aware enough to wonder what Dayan is even becoming since its liberation. Zihark is confused. Continuing this path, he and the Dayan army confront Sigrun, Tanith, and Kirin. After they question his being in Dayan, he tells them that this is his homeland, and he's fighting to protect it, just like they are doing with Benyan. At this point for the Dayan army as a whole, nobody really knows what's going on and why they are even fighting again, Zihark included. Morale is at a low, and the only person who is keeping them going is Micaiah and her grit. It's apparent that he is here to protect home soil, comrades, and Micaiah, but as it was indicated in 3-6, he is not thrilled about this either. And while he is unsure about what Dayan is doing himself, he knows for a fact that hunting down Laguz goes against literally everything he stands for. In the finale of Part 3, Zihark loses everything. In the final battle against Ike's forces and the Laguz Alliance, Zihark fights not just his former friends, like Brom or Ilyana, but of course more Laguz whom he was told to fight. And following the trend, he will not attack Brom or Ilyana out of loyalty to them. In the finale, the real motive behind Dayan's attack on the Laguz Alliance is revealed to him. Through the threat of violating the terms of the Blood Pact, Peleus is forced to follow Lakain and the rest of the Benyan Senate's orders. The consequences of betraying the Blood Pact become known to Zihark, and now he doesn't have a choice but to continue this war or face his demise.
Ike, I'm sorry. I must raise my sword against you. I'll take my secret to the grave. Besides, you know I don't like to complain. At your ready, Commander.
With his path seemingly locked into fighting this war, he is forced to commit fully to Dayan.
With this stroke, the last of my ideals is cut down.
Staying with Dayan throughout the conflict consequently forces him to abandon everything he used to fight for. Before, he was fighting against Laguz, but stuck with Dayan out of loyalty to his comrades and for everything he helped build. But now? The entire war was a farce to begin with, and Zihark ends up becoming someone he never thought he'd become. Someone else complicit in the destruction of Laguz. Dayan hasn't changed, but he has, for the worse. Zihark cannot be redeemed in this path. Everything he worked for to honor his girlfriend becomes truly meaningless when he squanders his final opportunity to defect and salvage his principles. This is the bad ending, the unhappy end. Zihark may be a soldier, but he's no hero. On the wrong side of the war, he's just another pawn in the Senate's scornful stratagem. Going all the way back to the first battle at the Raban River, Zihark has the chance to immediately defect to the Laguz side if you have him walk up to Lethe or Mordecai.
The Dayan soldiers call this war the subhuman hunt. You know I hate that word. I believed that Dayan would change, or at least I used to. But now, I can't just stand by. This war is the last straw. I can't fight for Dayan anymore.
You may not have claws, but I think your soul is more Laguz than Bjork. Welcome to our tribe, Zihark.
He chooses his ideals and makes the call to abandon Dayan. For despite all the sacrifices he's made to see Dayan free again, Dayan's people did not change. The word subhuman is used freely, but what's worse, it's actually a term that his fellow soldiers are using as motivation in this conflict. The nearly same conversation between Lethe and Mordecai occur in 3-7 as well. Zihark chooses not to be complicit in the murder of Laguz anymore. The interesting thing about 3-7 and the finale of Part 3, though, is that he has the chance to defect from a talk conversation with Brom or Ilyana if the player has an A support that was transferred from Path of Radiance. The Ilyana support reveals something interesting about Zihark and his loyalty to Dayan.
Sir Zihark, it's not too late. Let's not fight.
I can't do that. Dayan has just freed itself. I can't betray it now.
Even if you had been ordered by Dayan to hunt down Laguz?
I just...
But this isn't you! When I met you, you were so nice. And you never doubted yourself or your friends. You even risked your own life to fight on behalf of the Laguz. And now, you're throwing it all away.
Ilyana.
Yes?
Thank you. You've opened my eyes.
Pardon?
I will leave the Dayan army. My friends in Dayan are dear to me, but I refuse to take part in any hunt, or lie to myself any longer.
Oh, Zihark, I'm so glad.
At first, Zihark is defending his reason to stay with Dayan, but Ilyana makes a keen observation. The Zihark of old would have never even entertained the thought of following these orders that Peleus had made, no matter how much he respected him. From the very beginning when we saw him in Path of Radiance, he was already willing to cut down anyone who wished to oppress Laguz or worked against his utopia. The truth is, Zihark is in denial if he follows Peleus' orders. He is fully aware that this isn't how he envisioned Dayan, and definitely knows that what he's doing is the antithesis of everything he's built himself up to be. Through his friends helping him think critically about Dayan, he chooses his principles over his comrades and country. But this decision doesn't just affect him. His former allies have something to say about his betrayal. What Radiant Dawn manages to portray about Zihark is the consequences of his actions and the impact it has on his former Dayan comrades. It hurts Meg to see Zihark leave her side, and while he tries to convince her to switch teams and that Dayan is in the wrong, she sticks with Micaiah, but they choose not to fight each other. Soth actually completely understands Zihark's decision and kind of indicates that he's surprised that Zihark didn't leave sooner. Regardless, despite the camaraderie both men have for each other, they recognize that they are enemies now and will engage in combat. But the real sad conversation from this fallout is with Micaiah herself. What's frustrating for both Zihark and Micaiah is that at this point, neither of them know what Peleus is thinking. Zihark can leave, but she can't.
I don't know, Zihark. I wish I did. I'm sorry.
No, I'm the one who should be sorry. I know this isn't your fault. It's just that now I wonder if the time I've spent fighting to liberate Dain was well spent. It makes me sad.
That last line is one of my favorites that Zihark has. It's so poignant. He reflects on everything he did in Dain to bring it back to its former glory and wonders if it was even worth it. Maybe he should have stuck with the Ike mercenaries. Maybe he should have formed his own mercenary band that supports Lagoo's social justice. It drives the point home that the entire situation just sucks. Nobody is happy about this fight. People are doubting themselves and what they've done to get here. And some folks, like him, begins to regret wasting his time fighting for the Liberation Army. In the end, they go their separate ways, telling each other that they could never hurt one another. There is a common theme of sadness and regret within these conversations. These are Zihark's friends he's abandoning, and despite being against each other now, he still won't fight most of them. In the Part 3 finale, he gets more opportunities to talk with his former allies. This time around, he can speak with Jill, Tauroneo, King Peleus, and has another round of conversations with Soth and Micaiah. The major difference between then and now is that the Liberation Army's inner circle is now aware of the stipulations of the Blood Pact. His talks with Tauroneo, Peleus, and Micaiah confront his betrayal. Zihark doesn't go into these conversations with a bone to pick. Instead, he wants answers. He wants to figure out what is happening to his home country. Unfortunately, they won't say a word to him. Not just because he's their enemy now, but because the Blood Pact binds them to secrecy. He begs Micaiah to tell him how Dain lost its way, but she says nothing. And he's left to guess that she has no time for a traitor. Zihark approaches his king and asks him to listen to what he has to say, but Peleus calls him a deserter. Zihark gets yet another non-answer and walks away. Tauroneo says there's nothing to discuss and tells him to return to the Apostles' army. Frustrated, Zihark takes matters into his own hands.
I will find out what's going on here. If my country can't save itself, then I'll save it. But I'll never raise my sword against you. Goodbye for now, General. I hope our next meeting goes better.
Forgive me.
As far as all parties involved are concerned, this is the end. Zihark says his goodbyes to his old comrades for good, and with the exception of Soth, he walks away from them, unwilling to fight them despite them being enemies now. He takes their labeling of him as a traitor on the nose and remains focused on his principles. Despite becoming a traitor, Zihark doesn't lose sight of Dain itself. His king and the king's generals have become contemptible towards Lagoo's and have sided with their former enemy. Zihark has no specific plan to save Dain, but currently he's the only person on either side who is willing to try something. In Fire Emblem, there's always a difference between being a soldier and being a hero. Zihark becomes a hero after proving he will sacrifice his progress and honor his late girlfriend for the protection and freedom of the Lagoo's, but even more so when he tells Tauroneo, the Dain military incarnate, that he will take their country into his own hands and save it himself. In Part 4, Chapter 5, Zihark gets the opportunity to confront the scientist Izuka, the mastermind behind the creation of the Feral Ones, enslaved Lagoo's brainwashed into fighting for him. He's a maniacal, vile, and psychotic person with no empathy for anyone. After being asked by Zihark why he performed these experiments, he simply says they make for great subjects. That's it. Izuka is, in a sense, a direct contrast to Zihark, the absolute worst that humanity could ever spawn. Zihark's rage is justified. Killing Izuka here will not solve everything, but is it ever a good start to realize his dream? Zihark's unique reason to be fighting Intelius makes him stand out. He isn't a Grail mercenary, nor is he a soldier with an allegiance to swear to. In a world rampant with racism, he's a guy from Dain with an open mind. And because of suffering losing the girl he may only ever love, he made a promise to himself and to honor her memory. To create a world where Laguz can truly, freely coexist with Bjork. When he joins the Grail mercenaries, he meets people that can help him reach his goal. In Radiant Dawn, he helps lead the Dain Liberation Army to help Peleus turn Dain into something else. Something better than it used to be. But that progress was all for naught. And soon Zihark had to make a choice. Betray his ethics and honor his comrades, or betray his comrades and honor his ethics. We as players get the choice to determine what path Zihark will choose, so it will never be certain where he canonically goes. But what I am certain about, at least, is that Zihark loses sight of who he is when he becomes a pawn, complicit in the destruction of Laguz, but he becomes a hero when he rejects the status quo, cuts his losses, and gains the grit to take the world on for what he believes is right. Will Tellius ever become completely accepting of Laguz? We'll never know. But if it does, I bet he'd have something to do with it.